the virtues, some of the benefits, some of the rulings, some of the things we should be and shouldn't be doing during the days of Thul-Hijjah. Now, when is Thul-Hijjah starting? Monday? Tuesday? Maybe Monday, maybe Tuesday. One of those days, inshallah. So we're a few days away from the beginning of Thul-Hijjah, which is the month of, the most important thing that happens during Thul-Hijjah is Hajj, of course. Okay. Now we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَرَبُّكَ يَخْلُقُ مَا يَشَاءُ وَيَخْتَارُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates and He chooses certain things and certain people and certain places above others, right? So can anybody think of examples of things that Allah gave virtue to over others? The sacred months, okay? Minhum arba'atun hurum. Allah says, of the months are 4 that are sacred. So Allah chose those months over others. What else? Things that Allah chose over others. Times that Allah chose, like Ramadan in general, or the last 10 nights of Ramadan. Anything else? Eid. The days of eating and drinking. The days of Eid. Now, places like Mecca, certain masajid, where the reward in Mecca, for example, the reward for one prayer in Mecca is how many times compared to any other masjid? 100 times? 100,000. 100,000 times. One salah in the haram is worth 100,000 prayers anywhere else. Okay, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives virtue to certain things, even some of the prophets. Ulul azmi min ar-rusul. Allah chose certain messengers and prophets above others and made them the best of the prophets and messengers. So of those things that Allah gave virtue to, those times that Allah gave virtue to, are these days of Thul-Hijjah. Now what is, and in the same verse when Allah says that minha arba'atun hurum, Allah also says, فَلَا تَظْلِمُوا فِيهِنَّ أَنفُسَكُمْ. So don't oppress yourselves in those days. Some of the scholars, they said, don't oppress yourself means someone that doesn't take advantage of those days, they've oppressed themselves. So when Allah gives us these opportunities to take advantage of, and a person lives right through it as if it's any other day, takes no steps, tries to do nothing differently to take advantage, that falls under the definition of oppressing oneself during those days. فَلَا تَظْلِمُوا فِيهِنَّ أَنفُسَكُمْ. Some of the scholars said, if you don't do what you need to do to take advantage of those days, then you've oppressed yourself during those days. Okay? Now, what is the proof that these days have virtue? There has to be proof. We can't just choose to decide that these are good days or important days. What is the dalil? What is the proof from the Quran and the Sunnah that these days are virtuous? وَالْفَجْرِ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears by them. وَالْفَجْرِ وَلَيَالٍ عَشْرٍ. Ibn Abbas, he says, it refers to the first 10 days of Dhul-Hijjah. Any other proofs? What's that?
By the night twice 5. Speaking of
by the night. No, that's what he just mentioned. Yes, correct. In the Quran, Allah swears by those days. Any other proof anybody can think of? Proof from the Quran and the Sunnah? What was it? What does Allah say in Surah Baqarah? I'll give you a hint. وَاذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ فِي أَيَّامٍ مَعْدُودَاتٍ. And remember Allah in the specified days. Those are the days of Dhul-Hijjah. Remember Allah, make dhikr of Allah often during those days. Allah is talking about the days of Dhul-Hijjah. Okay? Particularly, we have a day that has a lot of virtue, which is the day of Arafat. Something specific happened during that day other than Hajj. We know the virtue of Hajj. There's something that happened on the day of Arafat that has virtue. What? That's Muharram. Sure. Adam? What about him?
Where he pulled out the souls on the day of Arafat? Or extracted the souls out of Adam?
No. There's nothing no correlation there. Anything else? The day of Arafah, something happened. Something was revealed on the day of Arafah. Something from the Quran revealed on the day of Arafah.
The last verse of the Quran.
Possibly the last ayah of the Quran. اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الإسلام دينا. Possibly the last verse revealed of the Quran. On this day I have completed your religion and perfected my favor upon you and chosen for you Islam as the preferred and accepted way of life to Allah. This verse was revealed on the day of Arafah. Okay, so these are some of the virtues. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he said that ما من أيام العمل الصالح فيها أحب إلى الله من هذه العشر. There's no days when the good deeds are more preferred and beloved to Allah than these 10 days. No day. So whatever you do of good deeds, this is the best time to do it. Whether it be prayer, giving sadaqah, whatever it is, fasting, and we'll come to some of those. But anything that you do has virtue over doing it any other time. The more that you do, the better. The more that you do. So for example, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ذَلِكَ وَمَنْ يُعَظِّمْ شَعَائِرَ اللَّهِ, whoever honors the symbols of Allah, وَمَنْ يُعَظِّمْ شَعَائِرَ اللَّهِ, whoever honors the symbols of Allah, then that is from what? تَقْوَى الْقُلُوبِ. Then that shows the piety of the individual. So whoever enters these days intending to do as much good as possible, then that's an indication of what? Ta'zeem sha'air Allah. And it's an indication of taqwa al-qulub. So you go into these days ready, trying to know what to do, prepared to do as much as possible, getting ready to recite Quran and make dhikr and fast and all of that. This is a sign of piety. Whereas somebody who just lives the days like any other days of the year, not even knowing that there's virtue in them, not doing anything differently, then that's a sign of weakness of Iman. Okay? What's the greatest act of worship that a person can do during these days? What's the best thing that you can do? The best thing that you can possibly do? Fast? Fasting is great. Is there anything bigger than fasting? Making Hajj. Okay? So there is nothing bigger and better that a person can do during these days than make Hajj, of course. And Hajj is following the footsteps, the example of Ibrahim alayhi salam, whose whole life symbolizes true submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِذْ قَالَ لَهُ رَبُّهُ أَسْلِمْ قَالَ أَسْلَمْتُ لِرَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to him, submit, he submitted a complete submission to Allah, and that's symbolized in every part of his life. So everything we do in Hajj, every ritual of the Hajj symbolizes that submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, now practically, what should we be doing during these days? What's the first thing that we should be doing? We're not making Hajj. Assuming we're not making Hajj. What's the first thing that we should be trying to do during the days of Thul-Hijjah? Fast, dhikr, Quran. Anything before that? Before the fasting and the dhikr and the Quran. Is there anything that would come even before that? Qiyam. Qiyam is a good one. You're going to pray Qiyam, inshallah?
Your intention if you're going to do like
Everything starts with the intention. That's good. Okay, you go in with the correct intention, then you might be rewarded based on your intention alone. Leaving sins is another important one. So, on the topic of leaving sins, we can say that the first thing we should focus on is the wajibat. Before any of the extra acts of worship, let's make sure that our obligations are correct before anything else. وَمَا يَتَقَرَّبُ لِي عَبْدِ بِشَيْءٍ أَحَبَّ إِلَيَّ مِمَّا افترضته عليه. My servant doesn't draw closer to me with anything more than that which I have made wajib upon him. So that's number one. During these days, let's make sure we're making salah on time. We're waking up for Fajr. Fajr is early. Are we going to pray Fajr on time? Are we praying it at 7 a.m.? Or are we praying it at 4:11 a.m.? So let's start during these days with making sure that we're fulfilling the wajibat before anything after that. طيب, after the wajibat, Umar mentioned avoiding the major sins. Okay? And the scholars, they speak sometimes about hurmatul makan was zaman. The hurma, or the virtue, the honor of a place and a time, right? So when the time is more virtuous, just like during Ramadan, for example, then the sins might be even worse. Just like committing sins in Mecca, for example, would be worse than committing them outside of Mecca, outside of the Haram. So when you enter into a time that Allah has given virtue to, then you want to be that much more careful during those days that you're avoiding the sins, and especially the major sins. After that, another common one that we try to do during the days of Thul-Hijjah is before dhikr. Dhikr is one of them for sure. We'll talk about dhikr. There's no particular order here, but fasting. Okay, we're going to try to fast. Now, should we be fasting all of the days of Thul-Hijjah? Or is it just a particular few days or one day of Thul-Hijjah? What is the ruling on fasting during these days? How many days should you fast? All of them? All 10? It can't be 10 because the 10th would be... So not 10. Definitely not 10. 9? Okay. So the sunnah, we can say that it's preferred, it's good, it's recommended to try to fast as many days as possible during these days. There's narrations about some of the companions, such as Umar ibn al-Khattab and others, that they would fast all or as many of these days as possible. There are some narrations from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ with varying levels of authenticity about fasting all of the days, but we do have narrations about the companions trying to fast all of these days. So we would say that it's something mustahab, it's good, it's recommended to try to fast as many of these days as possible. Specifically, everybody should fast when? The day of Arafah. The day of Arafah. Because that is the day that forgives, as the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, 2 years of sins. Okay? 2 years of sins are forgiven with that one day of fasting. So for anybody that's not making Hajj, they should definitely fast the day of Arafah. As for the Hujjaj, then it's generally not recommended to fast on the day of Arafah. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, when he made Hajj, he went out that day and showed the people that he wasn't fasting, so that, because he's the example to follow, of course, so he didn't want the people to think that they need to be fasting that day. He went out specifically to show that he wasn't fasting that day. So for the Hujjaj, the scholars, they said that it's not recommended to fast. Rather, you need the strength and you need to drink water and you need to be strong to be able to make dua all day during the day of Arafah and be following the pillars of Hajj from one to another. But for the one that's not making Hajj, then it's highly, highly recommended to fast on the day of Arafah. Just think that in general, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he said, "Man sama yawman fi sabilillah, ba'ada Allah wajhahu 'anil nar 70 kharifa." For a person who fasts one day, fi sabilillah, the scholars, they differed on the meaning of fi sabilillah here. What is the meaning of fi sabilillah? In the path of Allah. What is in the path of Allah? Some of them said it means when you're on an expedition or on the way to a battle or something like that for the sake of Allah, then this hadith is referring to fasting during that time. Okay, but some said that it's general, yani in the path of Allah, in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whoever fasts one day in the way of Allah, then Allah will keep his face a distance of 70 years away from the hellfire. That's one day. Okay, and that's in general. That's in general. So what about the days that are given specific virtue, like the day of Arafah? Okay. Other than that, how about the day of Eid? What about fasting? What if somebody fasted all 9 days and they decided, let us continue, this is good, I'm in the zone, the fasting is going well, let's continue fasting throughout. Can you fast on the day of Eid? The answer is no. The day of Eid and the days of Tashriq, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he said these are days of eating and drinking. So these are not days of fasting. So nobody should fast the day of Eid. And the scholars, the majority of them said it's not permissible to fast on the days of Tashriq, which are the 3 days after Eid. So those days, nobody should fast on those days. A common question that comes up, what if I have days, Thul-Hijjah begins, what if I have days of Ramadan that I haven't made up yet? What do I do in this situation? Can I fast during the days of Thul-Hijjah? Can I fast the day of Arafat? Do I need to make up the days that I missed from Ramadan first? Can I combine between the two? What do we do in this situation? Uzair knows the answer. You should make a separate intention. Separate from what? How about during the days of Thul-Hijjah? The 9 days of Thul-Hijjah. Thul-Hijjah begins, you still have days of Ramadan that you haven't made up. What do? Do you intend the days of Ramadan first? Those are obligatory fasts, aren't they? It's wajib to fast those days. These days are not obligatory. So which one takes precedence? The obligatory over the sunnah, right? Over the mustahab. So should I make up those days first? What do? Combine them? During which days? Okay. So during the days of Thul-Hijjah, in general, before Arafah, you can combine the intention, no problem. There's narrations about some of the Sahaba delaying making up the days of Ramadan until the days of Thul-Hijjah and making them up during these days, no problem. So when it's a day that has a general benefit or virtue, then it's permissible to make up what was missed during that day and combine the intention. But the day that has a specific virtue, like the day of Arafah, which has its own specific virtue, the Prophet ﷺ said that أحتسب على Allah, I expect from Allah that it's going to forgive a year before and a year after. It has a specific virtue in and of itself, then that day should be left to fast on its own. Don't combine the intention with that one. So that in general you can combine. But when there's a specific virtue, then fast the day of Arafah alone without counting it as a day that you're making up, and then you can continue making up the days after that if you still need to make up days. Clear? طيب. What else are we going to try to do? So we're going to stick to the wajibat and make sure that we're doing them correctly. We are going to try to fast as much as possible, and specifically the day of Arafah. What else? We said that in the Quran, Allah said specifically what? وَاذْكُرُوا اللَّهِ. Remember Allah. Make dhikr of Allah during these days. So the next thing is that you should be trying to make as much dhikr as possible during these days. Imam Bukhari, he recorded a hadith in the Mu'allaqat that some of the Sahaba, such as Ibn Umar and Abu Hurairah, they would go out to the marketplaces and say the takbirat. And then people would hear them and they would repeat the takbirat with them. Okay? So in general, throughout the days of Thul-Hijjah, from the beginning of Thul-Hijjah all the way through the days of Tashriq, it's a sunnah in general to be saying takbirat and other types of dhikr as well. But we should be saying takbir. Now what is the format for saying the takbirat? What is the proper format? So they were doing it in the marketplaces. Okay? So the scholars, they said do it in your home, do it in the market, do it when you're coming and going, do it in the masjid. This is in general. In general. What is the format for the takbirat? How should it be said? Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. How many Allahu? Three. And then La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. 2. And then Walillah alhamd. So 3 and 2. That's one possibility. Is there any other possibility? 2 and 2. Or It was also narrated as 3 and 2 and 2, 3 and 2, 3 and 3. All of those are acceptable, meaning Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, walillah alhamd. Whether you say Allahu Akbar in the beginning 3 times, or 2 times, or 3 and then 2, all of these are acceptable. The scholars, they said this is ikhtilaf, tanawwu'. They're all acceptable. When there is this type of ikhtilaf, which is tanawwu', variety, then if any of them come with a more authentic chain of narration, the scholars, they said that this is the preferred way to say it. Whatever is asah al-isnad, if the isnad is more authentic in one way than another, then that is the preferred way, but the other ways are still acceptable. So some of the scholars, they said that the most authentic chain that came was 2 and 2. Some of them said that. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah, because this makes witr 2 and 1, and then 2 and 1. Some said that, but in general, all of 2, 2, 3, 2, 3, 3, all of those are acceptable. So we should be doing it when? All the time, as much as possible. We have a takbir which is mutlaq, which is what? General. And then there is specific, which is muqayyad. There's a mutlaq. The mutlaq is all throughout the days of Thul-Hijjah to be making takbir. This is mutlaq in general. And then there is one that's muqayyad, which is specific, which is what? It starts when? When does the specific start? Fajr of the day of Arafat. That's for the people not making Hajj. Fajr of the day of Arafat until the 3 days of Tashriq. When do we make those takbirat which are specific? After the salawat. So after the salawat, there's a takbir, that's the specific takbirat from the day of Arafah and through the days of Eid. Those are muqayyad, those are specific takbirat. And for the Hujjaj, it would start the following day. Okay? So that's when it comes to the takbirat. Other than that, we're going to try to say as much dhikr as possible now.
Sometimes they add to the takbir some other wordings, what they like. Is it permissible?
Allahu A'lam, the narrations that mention the takbirat is with this wording only. Okay? With this specific wording. So when we're trying, especially when we're doing those that are muqayyad or those that are specified as acts of worship, we should try to follow the ahadith. Then in general, if somebody says different types of dhikr, then that's a general dhikr and there's no problem, inshallah. Okay? Anything else then, other than that, any other good deeds that a person does during these days, whether it be to give sadaqah and read Quran and pray Qiyam al-Layl, and whatever it is, then try to do as much of it as possible during these days. Last but not least comes another act of worship that's specific to these days, which is the sacrifice, the udhiyah, the qurbani. Okay? What is the proof? Is there any proof from the Quran for the sacrifice? Don't tell me Surah Baqarah. That's 50 pages long. You have to give me the ayah. This could be a good guess, Surah Baqarah. Yeah, I think it's in Surah Baqarah or Ali Imran, one or the other. You narrated, you limited it to 15% of the Quran. What's the dalil? Surah Al-Hajj. طيب. Does anybody know the dalil? There's one that comes in the short surah which mentions sacrifice in general, which is فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ وَانْحَرْ, and sacrifice for Allah. فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ وَانْحَرْ. Nahr means to sacrifice for the sake of Allah. This is in general. There's one that's more specific. Allah says وَالْبُدْنَ جَعَلْنَاهَا مِنْ شَعَائِرِ اللَّهِ, and the sacrifice, we made it as one of the rituals for Allah. One of the rituals for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, so the sacrifice is mentioned in the Quran. What is the ruling on the sacrifice? What is the ruling on the sacrifice? When we say ruling, is it wajib? Is it mustahab? Is it you have to do it once in your life? You have to do it every year? You should never do it. Sunnah mu'akkada. Sunnah mu'akkada. A verified sunnah. Okay? Any other ideas? Wajib. It's wajib. If something is wajib, then that means what? Whoever doesn't do it is sinful. If it's wajib, then whoever doesn't do it is sinful. The one who does it gets reward, and the one who doesn't do it is sinful. If it's mustahab, then that means that the one who does it gets rewarded, but the one who doesn't do it is not sinful. So which one is it? Mustahab? Closer to mustahab. Okay? Wallahu a'lam. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he sacrificed every year in Medina. Every single year in Medina, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam sacrificed. So it is a sunnah that is no doubt verified, something that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam never left doing. Some of the scholars said that a person who's capable of doing it, and you're financially capable, there's nothing holding you back. Some of the scholars, they considered it disliked, makruh, not to sacrifice if you're able to do it. There's nothing holding you back. There's no financial restraint, and you simply don't do it. Some of the scholars, they said that this is makruh, this is disliked. Some even went to the extent to say that if a person has to borrow money to do an udhiyah, a qurbani, they should borrow money even. Some of them went to that length. Okay? So it is no doubt mustahab. It has a great virtue, and there's a lot of reward associated with it. What is the reward that's associated with it? Anybody know a specific reward associated with the sacrifice? There's a famous hadith that with the first مع أول قطرة, with the first drop of blood, يغفر لك ما قد سبق, that all of the previous sins are forgiven. This is a weak hadith, however. Perhaps perhaps this virtue might be there, but the hadith itself is not a strong hadith. One hasana for every hair on the animal. It's also a weak hadith. Tasty meat? What is that? That's a virtue? Is there any preference for one animal over the other? If you're choosing between animals, is there one animal that's preferred? Is there an animal that's preferred to choose over another?
After certain.
So the one with more meat, you're right, the one with more meat is more virtuous than the one with less meat. So if you choose one that has good meat, a healthy, good animal that has more meat, then this is better than one with less meat. How about if you're choosing between the types of animals? What's the best of them to choose? I went to the farm, he had a camel, a cow, and a sheep. Which one is better? Sheep. Sheep? It's better than a cow? There's more meat? A camel. Why camel, Adi? Because you're going to ride it first? You're going to ride it first and then slaughter it? Maybe. Which one is better? Some of the scholars, they said that it comes in that order. The camel, then the cow, then the sheep or the lamb. Why? Because in the hadith of coming to Jum'ah early, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he said the one that comes in the first hour early, it's like he slaughtered a camel for the sake of Allah. And the one who comes in the second hour, not as early, it's like he slaughtered a cow for the sake of Allah. And the one who comes in the third hour, it's like he slaughtered a lamb or a sheep for the sake of Allah. And then a chicken for the sake of Allah. So they said because of this hadith that the camel has preference over the cow, which has preference over the lamb or the sheep. But when we say a camel, how many people can, and if you're going to slaughter a camel, are you going to slaughter a camel by yourself? You can go in with how many other people to slaughter a camel? A total of 7. A total of 7 for the camel. Okay, how about the cow? They're both 7. Camel and cow are 7. But if you're doing a sheep or a goat, then you have to do it by yourself. Okay? Question? What's that? Say again, louder. I couldn't hear you. Crossing the bridge of the Sirat. I don't know of this narration. Allah, I haven't heard.
7 people, 6 people good persons, 1 people is a riba, and accept the Qurbani, all the people drop.
Yes, the Qurban is accepted. Even if a person is committing sins, hopefully doing good deeds will forgive some of the sins. So even if a person is sinful, it doesn't mean that their good deeds are not accepted and other good deeds that they do are not accepted. There will be, inshallah, we hope from Allah that He will still accept their good deeds. Okay, so we can go in with 6 other people. Now what if you're doing it? How about you have a family? You have a family. You have a wife or a husband and 3, 4, 5, 6 or 10 children. Do you need to do more than one lamb? Let's say you want to do it on behalf of your family. How many people of your own family is one animal enough for?
One is enough for whole family.
One is sufficient for you and your entire family. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ used to make the intention for himself and his entire family. Okay, so it's sufficient for you and your entire family. One animal. So one lamb or one goat or 1/7 of a cow or camel is enough on behalf of you and your entire family. Okay? Yes.
Is it family like your kids and your wife, or family, your mother, your father, your siblings?
Your kids and your wife, you can also make the intention for the reward to reach your others in your family as well. You can make that intention as well.
جزاك الله خير. الأخوة يسأل يقول أنه لديه عائلته بس سافرت إلى اليمن. فهل يجزئ أن ووالده هناك في اليمن، هل يجزئ له أن يقوم الأضحية هناك والده، هل تجزئ عنه أم يضحي هنا في اليمن ويضحي هنا في اليمن؟
Tamam. So the brother asks, he has family back home in Yemen or any place in the world. Is it permissible for him to have the family back home in the back home country do the udhiyah and slaughter on his behalf here, or does he need to do it here? Okay, does he need to do it here? The ruling here is that it's permissible. We can say that it's preferred to do the slaughter in the place that you are. It's preferred to do it that way. However, it's permissible to do the slaughter anywhere. So if you have family back home and you want to send money and you feel like there's a need for it there, the people will benefit more from it there. It will be distributed amongst the poor there, especially in these times when we live, when there's a great need. And in some places in the world, you can even slaughter for $50 or $75. Maybe you're able to do a few of them in certain parts of the world. Then there is no doubt that when the need is great, that the permissibility is there. The default, al-asl, is the slaughter should be where we are. That's the default. That's the asl, but it's permissible to do it anywhere. And the reward will be there, inshallah. أضحية واحدة تكفيك أضحية واحدة.
يعني هو عائلته ذهبت إلى أباه يعني.
لا بأس. أضحية واحدة تكفي. Correct. So what do you need to do or not do if you intend to slaughter? You intend to slaughter. What do you need to avoid doing? Cutting? Nails? Hair? And don't remove any skin. Nails, hair, and skin on purpose. Okay? Don't remove them purposely. People will ask, I was combing my beard or my hair and some hair came out. Did I lose my qurbani? No, you didn't. Okay? Do not purposely remove hair unless there's a specific reason that you need to do so. There's a specific reason that's an important reason, or some type of health reason or something like that, then it's permissible. But in general, once you intend to slaughter, whether you intended from the first day of Thul-Hijjah or you made the intention on the 5th day of Thul-Hijjah, from the time that you intend, then you should stop removing hair and nails and skin from your body. What if the person still did? He couldn't handle it. I couldn't go to Salatul Eid without trimming my beard and trimming my mustache. I just couldn't deal with it. I couldn't look at myself in the mirror anymore. So he gave in and he didn't follow the sunnah. What happened to his udhiyah? It's no longer accepted. He lost the reward. The reward went to somebody else. The reward fell down the drain with the hair. What happened? It's still valid. The udhiyah is still valid. However, the reward might be slightly decreased for not following the sunnah. Okay? So the udhiyah, the act of worship, is still valid, but the reward of following the sunnah correctly might be slightly reduced in that situation. So once the person makes the intention, they should stop removing hair and nails until when? Before Salatul Eid or after Salatul Eid?
After Salah.
And?
Until
Until
you slaughter.
you slaughter. No? Until after you slaughter. Okay? So until after you slaughter, then you can remove the hair and the nails and everything like that. Yes?
But that's only for the person who's going to actually sacrifice, not the people who are like
Good question.
females, not the people.
Good question. So this applies to the one that's sacrificing, not to the rest of the family. So you're sacrificing on your behalf and behalf of the rest of your family. These rulings only apply to you, male or female. Male or female. So if a lady is going to sacrifice and she's paying and it's on her own behalf, she shouldn't remove hair and nails as well. Okay? So this ruling applies to man or woman, the one who is sacrificing. The rest of the family, you're doing it on their behalf. They don't need to stop removing hair and nails. Or the one, let's say for example, you're hiring somebody to actually slaughter. That person, the wakil, he doesn't need to not remove hair and nails. It's only the one who the sacrifice is on their behalf. Yes?
Yeah, I thought the one who's actually going to take the knife and sacrifice it's on that person.
No, it's not the one that's actually going to take the knife. It's the one who it's done on their behalf. So if you, for example, are sacrificing and somebody at the slaughterhouse is taking the knife, it's you that follows the sunnah, not the one that takes the knife. No.
I have a
Question.
because another question I go out first time, all the doing perfect. After I know again something see is how the accept or no. After they know for the me example. I see all doing everything. After they I know I know go after they is a field and my house accept or no.
You didn't go to
After
On the day of
the
Hajj.
night is a field. Is
Arafat.
Yeah.
You didn't do what on Arafah?
No, me example. So I know go there and me house accept or no.
Go where? Go where?
He went to Hajj.
To Hajj?
He didn't went outside.
So you're saying somebody went to Hajj
Yeah, he's
but didn't go to Arafah?
yeah, sick. Same day he's sick.
Sick.
All green. All the everything perfect.
Arafah is a big place. So on the day of Arafah, all of the Hujjaj are going to be in the area of Arafah. You don't have to go to the mountain. You don't have to go to the mountain of Arafah. All of the land where they take all the Hujjaj is already Arafah. So even if he's sick and he's in the tent, this is still Arafah. And it's valid, inshallah. But if he was in a different country and he didn't get there in time, then there's no Hajj for that person. Yes. Those 7 people. All 7 people.
Prophet we slaughtered 2 animals, right? For which one was the second? One for the family and another was for specific. Are we supposed to follow the sunnah?
He made the intention, and because of this, it's permissible to make the intention for all of the Muslims as well. So he did one on behalf of his family and one on behalf of the
So
Muslims.
you can slaughter more than one.
You can definitely slaughter more than one. So you can do one here and one overseas, for example, no problem. طيب. If there's no other questions, we'll stop with that. Inshallah. Subhanakallah wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.